There we go. Okay, so this video is going to be on synapses. I'll use some specific examples of acetylcholine, which is what we're going to need to know as the examples they're going to use in the exam. So what we've got here, we've got the axon, the synaptic cleft and the dendrite. If we're just going through what these structures are, we've got we've got the synaptic vesicles that are containing our neurotransmitters. These are probably, if we're going for the example of acetylcholine, the acetylcholine would be in these vesicles. We have here, these are voltage-gated calcium ion channels. So anything that's going to, if something was going to enter here, this would be a calcium. We've got these neurotransmitters here going into the synaptic cleft. They're being released by exocytosis, and these are specific receptor sites on our dendrite. So if we're going to have a look at what happens at nerve junctions, we'll go through it in some simple steps, and these are probably going to be marking points. So first up, we've got the arrival of action potential. At the axon terminal is going to open the calcium voltage-gated ion channels. I'm not going to write that out full, but it is voltage-gated, so because the action potential is measured in voltage, so it might be, so we know that the threshold is minus 45 MV, and the resting potential is minus 70 MV. That's why it's voltage gated. So we know that calcium ions are going to diffuse in to our axon here. And then what these because we're going to have a higher concentration of calcium ions in the axon. So, and the calcium stimulates movement of vesicles, these vesicles here, along the cytoskeleton to the membrane by the use of motor proteins. So movement of vesicles that are containing our neurotransmitter, such as acetylcholine. So they're moving along the cytoskeleton by motor proteins, and they're going to fuse, keyword, with a plasma membrane. And once they fuse with the plasma membrane, they are going to be released by exocytosis into the synaptic cleft. And that's what we can see here. Just try and just rub that out so I've got more room. Okay. So then what's going to happen once we've got our neurotransmitter in the synaptic cleft, what's going to happen is it's going to diffuse across the synaptic cleft, and it's going to bind to these receptor sites. So this receptor site here is going to have a complementary shape to the neurotransmitter, so it's going to be specific to that. So they're going to bind to receptor site. And what these are here, these are sodium channels. And if actually we look specifically at the sodium channels, I might come back to that later actually, but what they have is I don't know how to draw this, like 1, 2, never mind, don't mind the drawing. So they've got 5 different protein, they've got 5 different units, and the binding of the acetylcholine opens, so these move out. And it allows the acetylcholine to enter through and brings the sodium ions. So if we've got that it's binds to the receptor site of sodium channels, so obviously if we've got the sodium channels, they're going to be opened, and sodium is going to be allowed to diffuse into the postsynaptic neuron. And then what happens once we've got a higher concentration of sodium ions in the postsynaptic neuron or the dendrite is that a generator potential, there's another video about generator potentials in more detail, but this is how the generator potential is produced. And if enough of these generator potentials are combined to the threshold of minus 45 MV, then you're going to get an action potential at the postsynaptic neuron. And that's like an overall what happens at the synapse. But if you're looking more specifically at acetylcholine, there's a few slight differences with it, or more details that you're going to need to include about that. So we've got the acetylcholine in our vesicles, and the arrival of the action potential is going to trigger these calcium ion channels voltage gated to open. Calcium ions are going to diffuse in, and they're going to trigger the movement of our vesicles containing the acetylcholine to move along the cytoskeleton by the use of motor proteins. They're going to bind with the plasma membrane, and by binding, they're going to be released into the synaptic cleft by exocytosis. And they're then going to diffuse across the synaptic cleft and reach a very specific receptor site for acetylcholine. Yep, I think that's it. But an important thing to mention about acetylcholine is that there's acetylcholine esterase in the synaptic cleft, and this is an enzyme that hydrolyzes acetylcholine. I'm going to write it out as an equation. Don't know if there's enough room. To choline and ethanoic acid. So then we've got these two smaller components here, and these are going to diffuse back into the presynaptic neuron, and then they can be recycled and stored in vesicles until they're needed again, and then they can be recombined because it's reversible. They can be recombined with the acetylcholine, and the process will continue again. That reaction does require ATP. Yeah. think that is all we need to know for that. So I hope that makes sense. And that's everything. Thank you for watching.